Welcome to the World Builders Anvil, episode 101, Rise of the Cat Mummies. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. Welcome back to the World Builders Anvil. As always, I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Mr. I must say my name and the stuff in between.
I'm Jeff Durr.
Okay, and today we are here to talk about the rise of the cat mummies. And really, I was watching a documentary.
This is clearly something straight out of your world, because the rise of the cat mummy sounds like an awesome science sci-fi movie, right?
You know, it's actually from real life.
This is real life?
Yeah.
We're talking real life. This is a real life episode.
This is a real life episode. I was watching a documentary, I believe, on Nova. If I can find it, I will link it in an episode.
Okay.
I can't promise that.
Oh, you know what? Let me interrupt you for a quick second, because it just occurred to me, it may have been 2 or 3 episodes that we have forgot to mention, that if you want to buy this documentary of Nova, you can go to www.garduel.com/Amazon. It'll take you right to Amazon, get whatever you want to buy. It doesn't change the price, and the holidays are coming, so.
Yeah, and it was safe. It was good that Mike did that, because if we don't do that, if we miss 3 episodes in a row, my wife will tase me.
I'm surprised. She might tase us for 1 episode. I honestly, I do feel bad, because I try to remember that every episode. So.
Yeah, but it doesn't always work.
Okay. So Nova, you were watching a documentary on Nova.
A documentary on pet mummies, because it was something the Egyptians got obsessed with.
Mummifying pets.
Okay. And we'll get more into that. But when I'm watching this, I'm always thinking about things from the perspective of a world builder. And I'm like, you know what? This really shows how culture and religion they usually start up together. And then due to circumstances, you know, this thing got wrapped up within industry.
Wrapped up?
Wrapped up. Pun not intended, but it should have been.
Yeah, I couldn't help that.
It should have been intended. I would have
That's
felt
why
better.
I thought,
yeah.
Because I saw you go so smoothly transitioning, I was like, I don't think he realized what he did there.
But essentially, it shows the way that when you have something important to a culture, how industry and government end up involved in it, and the effects and the way it changes and the unintended consequences. It's a great episode for a world builder to watch.
I was going to say, it sounds interesting just because the concept you're talking about
is interesting.
I wouldn't have thought it had you not said it that way.
Yeah, and it's something I had heard before, and so we'll just kind of hop into the first point, which is why cat mummies? Why do we have cat mummies? And I'm a huge cat person. I will never mummify one of my cats.
When we say cat mummy, we're being literal, but would you immortalize one of your cats in some fashion?
In some fashion, and that's really kind of what they're doing.
So I'm saying that's about the same thing. So you would mummify, but I'm using air
just
quotes.
Not literally.
Like Jeff's mummify would be different. It wouldn't be literal mummification.
And one of the things comes back to is, one of the things I like to talk about in the show a lot is a culture is something unique. And for the Egyptians, it was for them, a huge thing was, what do you do in the afterlife? Because sure, this world sucks, but you know, if you can get to the next world, which if you're a peasant, you probably can't. But, you know, if you're rich enough, you can probably buy your way into the afterworld.
And those royals are certainly going there.
They're certainly going there, especially if you're the pharaoh. I mean, you are, I think, in the course of your life, 3 different gods. That's pretty rough. Unless you're that person and you have all of the authority. But for everyone else, it might have sucked. And not really. They weren't a harsh. They were actually a pretty relaxed culture. In the term of the ancient world today, if you met ancient Egyptians, you'd think they were brutish and horrible, but in comparison to the Assyrians, they were pretty laid back. You prepare things to take with you in the afterlife, and all of the Egyptians would do this. When you would bury yourselves, you would have some pottery with food in it. You would have all sorts of things, and that stuff was literally going to be transported with you into the afterlife. The figurines that you build of people would be like of your servants, of your soldiers. they would actually be with you in the afterlife to help protect you and your holdings in the afterlife.
So those figurines, it wasn't like these are my playthings to come with me. They're literally like this is going to be a representation of like my soldiers, and they will.
I don't know, but maybe there were real people used for a while, and they turned to figurines. There's definitely this idea of figurines and magic in Egypt.
I do remember some stuff from school that talked about where certain, pharaohs or what have you were buried with a bunch of servants. Like they did actually have.
They might have for a while, but the figurines were a bigger thing. I know the Chinese did it for a while too, where
terracotta
concubines. Or actual real people.
Oh, you were talking legit people. Okay.
Well, legit
I thought you were going back to the figurines with the Chinese.
A lot of times in a lot of cultures, it would be tough to be the concubine or the wife. So a lot of ancient cultures, you would sort of get chucked into the grave.
The king's dead. Time to go. No, I'm still alive.
I'm not dead yet.
I'm not dead yet. The king doesn't matter.
But so for the Egyptians, a lot of it is the things you love, you take with you. And so I don't know if they would necessarily do it to the living, but maybe like if they had a cat die in their life early on, they would actually go take it to the temple, pay, and it was pretty expensive to have your animal mummified, but it would be part of the thing to prep them to take with you into the afterlife.
I also imagine that there's a bit of it. I mean, specifically because you chose cat mummies, why I'm bringing this up is
it's all animals.
Well, right, yeah. But cats were very highly revered. So, is that more?
It was a common pet used. I don't know if it was more later on. Probably not. Early on, probably cats and dogs. But it was more like family pets originally, or maybe some oxen, or if you were rich enough, oxen and farm animals.
Can't imagine how much time and effort it would take to mummify an ox.
And it takes, you think just the time and effort to mummify any of these things is a huge effort. And it was never a huge thing, I don't think, originally. But if you were rich enough and you really love Fluffy, you'd bring Fluffy with you into the afterlife. Maybe that jerk cat, Garfield, you wouldn't bring, but the Fluffy you'd bring.
Yeah, I like that.
Just using that name just randomly out of it.
I don't think that was random, Jeff.
Egypt over time started to weaken, and especially once you start breaking out of the early Iron Age, they start getting invaded more and more. And one of the things cultures do, they get worried that they're going to lose their identity, so they will start doing things purposefully, repetitively to help hold on to what they are.
Hold on to their culture. And, initially some of the people who invaded them sort of just became their culture. It was like, okay, now we have the Nubian pharaoh line and there's the other line of I cannot pronounce that took over for a while. Let me ask a question from the perspective of a historically ignorant person. Why would all these other places want to invade Egypt? Why was Egypt an attractive place to invade?
Two primary reasons. One, which you might think is the more probable reason, is wealth. They became the first superpower in the Middle East, definitely, maybe in the world. So they actually would play off of their neighbors, and they would have a lot of trade going back and forth. So a lot of gold, a lot of silver would flow in. There was some copper mines, I believe, in Egypt. There was a lot of wealth in Egypt. Okay. But that was actually secondary. The Nile.
I was going to say the Nile. That was going to be my guess.
And the beautiful thing with the Nile is now you have the Tigris and the Euphrates in Mesopotamia. And there are also two great rivers, a lot of fertile ground around them. The problem with those rivers are the way the weather happens north of them, they sort of randomly flood. So the flooding is important and you need it. But what happens is when you have the floods come down, if it's after harvest, it brings some good soil to replace what you used up with your last year's crops. And then you can grow crops the next year and have a next good season. But the problem is because it was sort of erratic, you would have floods that would come down before the harvest.
And ruin crops.
And that's really bad.
Yeah.
When you lose your crops, and a lot of the wars between city-states and the time of Sumeria, up before you start having the bigger empires come up around the Middle East, would be because a flood would wipe out the crops, and they go like
this must mean that Ishtara wants us to go invade that evil city. And, part of it's about food, but the religious and the economic reasons are really one back then. The Nile was an awesome river because it was clockwork. Every fall after the harvest, 95% or more of the time is when your floods come.
Nice.
And you'd have this period of time where the lower parts where your agriculture took place would be flooded. Everyone else, it would free up time for artisans at that point to go work on these great monuments of Egypt too. And that was another attraction too, was because Egypt had these great monuments, these things that no one else had, things on the scale of Egypt. No one for a long time. And even now, it's like, I think by mass, the pyramids are probably still the biggest buildings. Probably because most of it's filled in brick, but still, they're huge freaking buildings. Mm. They're mountains built out of a plain. And so part of it's that too. So it's like, if we can take over that shows our superiority over the region too. But I think ultimately food had, it was the breadbasket of the Mediterranean. Mm. And ultimately, as you start getting bigger and bigger empires built up, you have this first massive empire of the Middle East, the first, sort of multi-region superpower called Persia. And Persia pretty much went up to India. They went up into the Stan regions, basically east of the Caspian Sea. They went all the way up and at times occupied parts of Europe, even though that was sort of near the end. And they also took over Egypt, which is as far as they went into Africa. So you have this large empire. Very early, you figure, in the scope of things, this is really, this is just an Iron Age empire. But they were super powerful. And this leads to the Spartans in the 300 up north. But in Egypt, didn't have that moment. Persia came in. They just took over the thing. And hey, yeah, you God king. Yeah, whatever you are, punk. I'm the emperor. You can be the pharaoh, but we own you. We're in charge. When the Persians take over, it's the first time that Egyptians don't feel like, there's no, I think his name was Pi Ramsey and, or Pi Moses. And he was the guy who kicked out one of the older, groups that tried to take them over. There was no one like him. There was no resistance left. It was they were completely dominated. And the Egyptians start worrying. And so no one had really ever dominated Egypt to that level before, to where there was no Egyptian rulers getting ready to take over. And there's this real fear of the culture being lost. And so a lot of the people locally who identify as Egyptian, they start really tying back into their traditions. And so one of the things, and it's very much encouraged by the Persian overlords because they don't want unrest. So this idea of mummifying your pets and these beloved animals to come with you to the afterlife changes a little bit to one of the other traits of a polytheistic religion is you barter with the gods. You barter with them against each other to help you. And that's one of the reasons why you have sacrifices a lot of times, is because you're offering up essentially payment up to a god for something in return.
Would part of this bartering also be done with the things that you brought with you into the afterlife? Like, would you barter those items? Or
no?
Okay.
No, those are for you. Those are the possessions you're taking with you.
That's mine. I'm keeping that.
But it would be like you go sacrifice a cow, and that might be to help bring good crops the next year. And that's a very common thing through all polytheistic religions, and so the Persians are sort of encouraging this. But what happens is at this time, this whole pet mummification thing and taking things to the afterlife is turning into let me go to the local temple, and I forget which city it was in. There was a main one. But I'm going to order up this animal to be mummified and to be essentially is being made as a sacrifice to the gods. And it's probably more of a hope for us to hold on and to endure past the Persians. It's maybe because I want, revenge on Billy, and maybe I can mummify this thing and get Billy. But it starts turning from just this thing to take things with you into the afterlife to this way of performing a ritual sacrifice to the gods. And so
its purpose changes.
Yeah. And so industry starts building up, like all kinds of animals. I keep talking about cats, but, crocodiles, irises, all kinds of animals seem to be start start to be used in this scenario. All of these, sort of Nile area creatures are being brought in. And at the beginning, it kind of looks like they're sort of like hunting down and grabbing things and bringing them in. But then after a while, it starts to turn to this farming scenario where now you're starting to have farms built up to supply animals.
Just for mummification.
Just for mummification. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning, it wasn't that, but it looks like it sort of transitioned at some point, probably after the Persians took over. It's really when this starts becoming an actual like industry. So now you have these temples, which are acting as businesses in a way, not in a way, but literally you're bringing coin to them and saying, I need this cat mummy. And there would be this giant area, or a giant market once a year where you could go in and say, I want that alligator.
So they'd already be mummified and
so now they're already mummified and you're now buying them off the shelf.
So it's not even like this was an alligator that I had an affection for, whatever. Mm-hmm. It's like, to show my wealth and whatever to a god, give me that elephant mummified. Give me 2 of the oxen, the alligator on the left, and
no,
3 cats.
That one.
No, the other one.
Exactly.
That's kind of weird, though.
So it's like the shop of mummified animals that you're saying, okay, I'll just buy that and I'll give you the coin and you perform the ritual. So voila. Look,
capitalism at its best.
Capitalism at its best.
I don't have to do the effort. You're doing the effort, and I don't mind paying. Everybody's happy.
Everyone's happy.
Everybody wins.
The gods getting a payment.
Yay, capitalism.
Egypt will rise again someday because of all of our effort to the gods. Now, the problem was, unlike a lot of the other people who took control, once Persia took control of Egypt, Egypt never regained its independence. So shortly after, when the Persian Empire falls, what happens is it falls because of the rise of this character you might have heard of from history called Alexander.
I was about to say Alexander.
Yeah.
I'm glad I knew that timeline-wise. I knew that one. I was going to say it was Alexander, right?
Yeah, Alexander pretty much. And Egypt is one of his earlier conquests within the scope of things. He does that before he goes out to Babylonia. Why? Secure your food supply.
Right.
And also cut off their food supply.
Right. You need the food to feed the soldiers. Now, when the Greeks come in, after Alexander's death, and he takes the Persian Empire and he makes it even a little bit larger. He actually invades parts of India, and there's actually stories about how, they get to the Indus and literally the soldiers are like, come, we're going home. We're going home now. We're done. Because they're sick. They've left for Macedonia. We're way past Persia now. There's a story that he wanted to reach the Pacific. Who knows? But he was this bigger, larger than life character, and in and of himself, in building a city called Alexandria, which became hugely important. The Egyptian version, because he actually had a whole bunch of Alexandrias all over. Mm-hmm. But the one in Egypt that's the one.
That's the one because when he dies,
that's what the library was.
That's what the library was. That's where there was a great lighthouse there. All kinds of things, and mainly because what happens is when he dies, his family mysteriously all disappears within a few minutes of his death. And
that lends back to what we were talking about in the prior episode, where when there's a regime change, the old family gets wiped out.
Yeah, no, exactly. And this is a perfect example. And so you get a number of major empires that sort of appear, and some last for a really long time, that are dynastically related to his generals, the Parthian Empire. Egypt returns to become Egypt again and will go until the last pharaoh, which is Cleopatra. Maybe you've heard of her as well.
I seem to remember that name.
But she's actually, her family name is Ptolemy, and it was one of Alexander's great generals. And essentially he formed a line, and they were very focused on education. Like if you came into port at Alexandria and you had a book that they did not have in their library, they would take the book from you. They would scribe a copy of it. And I don't know, I think they maybe gave you the copy back even. I don't think they even gave you the original back, or maybe they did keep the copy. I'm not sure, but every text that they got their hands on, they would put a copy of in the great library. There was a great pagan, center for Hellenistic paganism in Alexandria as well too, which would be burned centuries later. But the idea when the Greeks come in, the Egyptians are like, come on,
So just Persians and now Alexander, now the Greeks, so leave us alone.
But the difference with
But I mean, how? And again, I don't want to get too caught up in the history, but if they've got all the food and they had been conquered for so long, I would assume that effectively the soldiers became local at that point. If the Greeks come in, they didn't have the force to be able to hold them back?
They probably had the force to hold them back, but the thing is, you don't want a prolonged occupation, because when you're in occupation, people resist against you. You want people to comply with you. So what Ptolemy did, which was clever, because he didn't have the power the Persians did. When Alexander's empire broke up, first there's this threat of the other successors trying to reclaim the Alexander's empire, which was a huge problem for centuries. So what happens is, because of the external threats of the other countries that were let go after Alexander's death, and the locals who identify as Egyptian and see you as Greek, the Greeks were clever, and instead of declaring themselves king, they became pharaoh, and they started trying to adopt all of the old traditions of Egypt. Now, the difference is...
But they wanted to be in charge either way.
Yeah, they were slightly modified, and so essentially, it became a way of using the local religion to control the mass for the government. So now government and religion are in bed with each other, to the point where government's maybe slightly on top, but religion is this instrument. And this might be the first time in history, in a very planned way, this was used to control the masses. Now, a lot of states came up because they believed the religion, and it was a king god or a king priest who was in charge, but they literally took over the local religion to control the population. And lasted for several centuries. Alexandria became a model capital, but they really start pushing this whole idea more and more. And once again, there's this another huge increase and spike in this mummification, because Greeks did in a huge way use this idea of, well, I'll kill the cow, I'll pour out a bottle of wine, I'll play the gods against each other, I'll do whatever it takes to protect myself and my family by making these bargains with the gods. So the idea of this mummy thing actually grows larger than even Egypt itself at this point, where you have people now coming from the near Middle East and from maybe Libya who are now also coming to take advantage of this thing, because they've Hellenized the
practice.
They've Hellenized the Greek or the Egyptian gods. So there's like this strange merge between the Greek and the Egyptian religions at this point. And so now this practice becomes even larger than just Egypt. So now this industry is getting massive pressure on itself. And now you start getting into this moral dilemma. What happens if you can't deliver the ritual that people need? They're coming from, 800 miles away. You better have a mummy for them, right? And so now
now it becomes a supply and
demand issue, because it's been used so successfully to help control the population. And this is really where you start to see how government...
Change the wording. Do you mean control the population, as population is implied, like the number of people that exist?
Not the number of people,
you mean to control the people.
Control behavior.
Yeah,
yes.
That's okay.
So now you really have government, religion, industry all in bed together, but it's so successful. The Ptolemies reign for a long period of time. So it keeps the Ptolemy dynasty in control for a long time. They really start having supply and demand issues under the Greeks. And so what happens is the Greeks essentially, the temples start, I don't want to say they start cheating, but what they do is they start using small amounts of mummy. So it becomes smaller and smaller. What happens is the Greeks, because of the success of this program, start having supply and demand issues. The temple, to keep it in track with the needs of the population, start cheating.
And the supply of the demand issue is simply them having enough time and enough people to successfully do these rituals.
Animals.
I was going to say, do they also have an animal?
It's more of an animal issue
because they got to breed all these animals.
So it's like you get these big, almost plastered mummies of cats, and I think part of it is maybe even greed too, where I can stretch this cat out over several, but there has to still be a religious belief in it because I don't think they found one yet that's empty. Mm-hmm. But now, instead of having a full cat mummified inside of there, maybe you have a few little bits at the bottom, and this sort of hard cat,
like a plaster-shaped
mummy. And then, because you don't take it home anyway, so you'll never know. It gets put into this giant vault outside of the temple. But essentially...
So they don't take them with them.
It's like inflation, sort of like, as they start taking the precious metal out of the coins... and there's inflation that happens, and so you get less and less actual cat or animal within the actual mummies.
Do they get a discount on a partial cat mummification?
Oh no, I don't think they. I think that is a highly held secret by the Egyptians because that would probably have caused massive rioting during the actual
like that time
temple
period.
Time. Yeah, because it was a festival that they would have once a year. Was the big time, but. I forget, there were several locations around Egypt. There's one major one, but there were several locations around Egypt where they would actually have these kind of temples and these giant vaults full of all of these weird animal mummies. The thing I saw in this is how the culture has a belief. The belief, turns into religion. And then over time, it's those things which help drive the early industries. That's where the early industries especially outside of agriculture, will develop. And then a lot of times too, whenever you get a strife back with the government, whether it's the actual local government or it's a foreign powers come in, they aren't dumb. They look at all of these things that are very important to your people, and they will try and use those things either in a way to encourage it to help control the population, or maybe if they want to oppress the population, maybe they'll say, you can't mummify anymore, which is exactly what happened when the Roman Empire finally became Christian. They really stomped down on everything pagan. They burned that, area up in Alexandria, which was the Hellenized sort of Rome at the time. There was no mummification. There was no speaking Egyptian. That all stopped under the Christians. And a lot of stuff you'll hear today that we accuse of Islamic fundamentalists doing in the Middle East, and we go, how could they destroy history? A lot of times when there's bent up anger, and the Christians probably had pretty good reason. I mean, right before that, they were being burned at the stake and burned in the circus. But, when they take over, there's a huge backlash against it. And all those things are used in the opposite fashion, to where if you try and mummify that animal, you'll be burned at the stake or whatever they did to pagans. I'm not sure. But, they would definitely not allow you to do it anymore. But it's all of those things. It's when you have those important cultural norms, those are the things you want to look at to know what are the first industries that are going to start showing up, because that's what's important to the people. And if you're in Egypt, it's going to be making cat mummies.
It's interesting that that's how a big industry was. You're talking about religion, government, industry, economy.
Mm-hmm. This is a huge part of their economy. And
also the social implication. Take a look at the other side of it. For the government, it was about controlling the populace. Mm-hmm. Let's keep them happy. Let's focus their money, so then that keeps our economy flowing. Mm-hmm. Keep them busy.
Keeps them happy.
Keeps them happy.
Busy.
Right. But also get a flip side perspective is how the people are seeing it and how they are responding to it.
One of the truisms about people is there's this keeping up with the Joneses thing, which is not an American cultural value. That is a human value. And so now it's like, well, they're the Joneses.
Joneses mummified an alligator this year.
Shoot. We need an elephant.
I was just going to do 2 cats and a dog.
But now I need an elephant. Jones won't outdo me.
That's an alligator. I'll show them.
That's right. So...
give me 3 shepherds, 2 Persian cats, the alligator on your left, and we're going elephant this year.
But the thing I like is the Egyptian culture is something people we're familiar with some of the symbology of it, but we're not super familiar with some of the details. But it gives you great examples of how cultural norms really influence someone in ways to us that make no sense. Mm-hmm. But to the Egyptians, it made perfect sense. And up until the time, when their culture kind of disappeared, around the 4th century AD, it made sense to the people around them because they interacted with Egyptians. But even just a few centuries after that, it just makes no sense anymore. Mm-hmm.
Because they put a stop to it.
And it goes to like what you say too is one of the important things for all cultures. And Mike and I were cheating. And Michael, whatever.
Come on, it's been a few episodes.
Okay, Michael, that's true. But we were cheating and talking about this earlier. And one of the important things to think about as you're building a culture is how do you deal with your dead? And every culture I know of, and there must be an exception that proves the rule, but it's very important how you deal with your dead. And it could be we have to get rid of the bodies as quickly as possible so they don't come up and eat us. Or it could be we have to, treat them a certain ritualistic way.
Right. And even, certainly modern cultures. Look at all the preparations, just talking about the Egyptians, everything that they did.
And how it builds up. I think this is where you're going, and I think it's a brilliant point, even though I'm going to say it.
I was about to say, you're not going to let me say it. No, go ahead. Because I'm not sure I had more, but go ahead.
But think about how much time and expense we put into when one of our family members die. Mm-hmm. We get them embalmed, and some of this we say is for health reasons, but how much of those health reasons are really a cultural built-in mechanism we think is better?
Right.
Because if they're buried, does it not matter they're embalmed?
Yeah. You don't have to embalm.
You do if they fly.
If they fly, yes. Yeah. But beyond that.
And that also could vary state to state. Because states do have, I think, different rules on what you have to do for death. Like with the small s, like Indiana, Connecticut. And maybe even big S states, like maybe England's like, you can't have an embalmed body flown here, which makes it all complicated. But a lot of those ideas that we have that are things that you do today were built up from this idea that you buried your dead as a Christian. You would prepare the body and bury them.
The thing that I like how, and I'm not going to get into a great deal of specifics about it because I'm not aware of all the specifics, but I like how Jewish culture looks at death when it comes to the idea of sitting Shivas or Shiva? Sitting Shiva?
I thought it was Shiva, but I could be wrong.
Okay. I'm going to say Shiva. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But the idea that the family that has lost a loved one is meant to do nothing. They're meant to relax. They're meant to grieve.
But for a defined period of time.
I think it's 7 days. I could be wrong on the time period. It might be 5. I'm not sure. But the point is that their friends and their family and their loved ones are supposed to come together and take care of the people who are grieving that the immediate, I believe it's restricted to the immediate family of the person lost. So like if you've got a family of 5 and one of the kids dies or one of the parents dies, everybody that's the immediate family of that member, they're sitting Shiva. And everyone else, like friends and extended family, comes together. They do the cooking and the cleaning and the caring for the household while everybody's accepting their grief and their loss. Whereas raised in a Catholic household and being a Christian myself, you deal more with the practical aspects of a person being lost, not as much of the emotional. Like the emotional aspects of the loss tend to be like that day, like the day of either the viewing and or the funeral.
Well, I think the thing is, and it kind of repercolates maybe here or there for weeks afterwards.
And not only, more than weeks, I'd say.
But you know what I'm saying? It's an extended time.
Right. But my point is not everybody, like that aspect of how we treat our dead is like, we don't deal as much with the emotional aspect of it. Whereas I think the Jews have a much better, a much healthier way of dealing with it. And that's just two completely different.
And that's, I think, partially cultural, because in Christianity, you've made it. You know, you are going to heaven to be with God. It's a good thing for you. It sucks for me. But ultimately, this is a better thing for you.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing about it is, like, really, if you really want to take the tenets of Christianity to the idealized mentality that is implied and not necessarily practiced. We should be mourning the birth of a person.
You would think so.
We celebrate the birth of a person because it's a new family member and it's a new life and it's a cause to celebrate. But we should be mourning them because they're coming into the difficulty of life, as opposed to leaving life, which should be celebrated because they're going to join God.
Well, I think New Orleans deals with it in the most Christian way, where you mourn up until the burial and you're mourning for yourself. And you wail and you gnash your teeth and you pull your hair and rip your clothes or whatever you do to mourn in New Orleans. But once that body's in the ground, all of those people there playing music, they swap it around and you're now celebrating that person's passing.
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with the old adage, do you know the difference between an Irish wedding and an Irish funeral?
No.
It's just one fewer drunk.
Oh man. Okay.
And my grandfather was actually, I know we're totally getting off subject, but I'll be brief. When my grandfather passed, he was the last surviving founding member of his VFW, and he was on the beaches of Normandy.
Oh wow.
And he was the patriarch of the family.
Yeah.
So when he passed, it was
huge.
It was huge. It was huge emotionally, and it was huge actually. His viewing, there were hundreds of people, and there were hundreds of people at his funeral. There were so many people. Of course, it was a military funeral, so there was a 21 gun salute and all that jazz. And it was so emotionally hard. It was so hard. But after the funeral, bodies in the ground, everybody goes back to the VFW that he helped, that he was one of the founding members of, and it was huge
raging
party. Yeah, it was a raging party. Now it was still very emotional and sad. But like his son, my uncle, got totally blotto, was dancing on the bar. I mean, it was
anything that happens when you have a lot of drinking.
It may as well have been a wedding. It was ridiculous. But I think that was just, I mean, obviously because emotions were so high and it was such an extreme, and you'd rather smile and be with your family, because while we're acknowledging a death, it may as well have been a family reunion, because you had people that were together that hadn't been together in some cases for generations.
Well, I think sometimes today, too, what happens is, because medicine can extend life, and it's not always pleasant the final few years, depending on what people die of.
Yeah.
Depending on what they die of, for the people who are surrounded by the agony of that, there is a release as well for them. There's like,
it's good that their suffering's over.
Well, it's like,
if they were suffering.
When my grandparents, especially my Nana, passed away, for me, it was a huge shock because I lived 800 miles away. And I knew she was going to die, and she was very sick, and she was on the verge of going to a nursing home, which she never wanted to do. And it was causing strife, but especially for the people who were there every day helping take care of her, which I appreciate them immensely. But for them, they were sad because she was the matriarch, I guess, of our family, which is funny. You have this old woman who lived in a trailer out in the middle of the country, and hundreds of people are showing up to pay homage to this person. And you're like, it shows you how wealth and money aren't always connected. And for me and my siblings, it was worse because for us, we weren't there. And it's like, I remember Nana from when I was a kid spending the summer at her house, not when I was, the last few years having to sit down and my uncle praying with her, because literally she determined that night she passed away that she was going to put in the paperwork and go to the nursing home the next day. And she passed away in her sleep that night. And so
that's interesting.
That's interesting. And you feel good because that was one thing she always feared. She never wanted to be in that situation, but she knew she was becoming a burden. And for her, that was the worst of the two evils. But when she finally came to that point and could accept it, it
was almost like doing that was her accepting her mortality.
Yeah. And maybe it was. But it was a moving thing. But for them, it's not that they were happy she was dead, but there has to be some relief.
Tension release. Yeah, absolutely.
So, but yes. So now that we've sort of covered mummies and a few ideas, but really, once again, the idea is think about your cultural norms and look to how you develop those into industries to support your early culture. And then later on, it will be a long period of time, depending on how much magic plays into the economy. But, it takes a long time for people to get past the basics. But once they do, you'll start having other things in the economy break out from those, but those become the pillars of your economy. Food will usually always be one, but besides that, look to the cultural norms, especially death values, especially, is education important or not important? But look at those cultural norms. They will lead you down the road, and later on, industry and government will use them as well to help control the population.
This has been a super interesting, talk. I really like this one.
This one, I'm sitting there, and my wife fell asleep 5 minutes after it started, and I usually do because we watch documentaries before we go to bed. But ones like this, I'm
just hooked you,
completely washed.
Is there anything else you want to say in closing, or do you feel complete about this?
I think we covered all we needed to.
Get to the world builder task of the day. Then?
Sure, and this one is take a look and build up a cultural average, which makes no sense. But take up and build a cultural norm is probably what I meant when I wrote average. Find something besides food that's really important and sort of war game it in your mind and go, how can this happen in the future? Where does this thing that's really, really important to this culture, how does that affect the economy? Is it tied to religion? Does the government get involved with it? But don't think about it just that day. War game it out for centuries.
Yeah,
see where it goes.
Just going back to the Nile, if you've got a river and it's super important, I mean, you could play devil's advocate and let's say the river dries up, or how does the culture change if the river just starts becoming polluted because of people who live upstream?
Oh, yeah.
All of these different things, not just the flooding of a healthy river that's doing good for your crops.
Now it's a horrible river.
Now it's a bad river. Now that could absolutely ruin a city, because the reason they started the city there in the first place is because that's where the food is.
Or take an ancient Egyptian scenario and maybe upriver nearer the source, there's this group of evil other peoples, and something they do every 7 years toxifies the river.
So we got that one season. Here it comes
every 7 years.
Their festival season ruins the river.
What implications does that have on the local religion? Mm-hmm. Or when they find out there's someone that actually causes it, and even though it might be inadvertent from them.
Yeah, they might not even be doing it on purpose.
But for whatever reason, what's the reaction at that point? So just war game it out going into the future.
So what's the real world task of the day?
Get ready for the holidays.
It's beginning to look a lot. No, I won't even sing.
Well, technically, this is the post Thanksgiving episode.
So we're already into the holidays. Welcome to the holidays, everybody.
And for me, I refuse to acknowledge Christmas before Thanksgiving, but now since Thanksgiving has just passed.
Well, in my house, we the holidays are always exciting in my house because Sarah and I courted during the holidays. We met in October.
So it's anniversary month.
It's the anniversary season. We met in late October, so we got to know each other and we started dating through Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's. So every year, and it's funny because earlier in the season, my wife was saying towards the tail end of summer, beginning of fall, Sarah was like, I'm not really feeling Christmas this year. And just last night, she was like, I can't wait for Christmas. And I'm like, I knew you'd be that way. She's like, what are you talking about? You just said, I don't know, a month ago that you weren't looking forward to Christmas. She's like, I never said that. I'm like, you absolutely said that.
I would never say I'm not looking forward. I love the Christmas season. Of course, the 27th being my wife's birthday is Christmas.
Christmas.
And, which is double meaning because also, a lot of times people would forget birthday presents for her and go, that's your birthday and Christmas present.
Yeah, no, that doesn't fly.
Oh, and I was told, I think the first Christmas we were together that there's no such thing as a combined
combo gift. No. That's because that's not fair because if you were born in August.
It's not. And I'm born in June, so I get just the opposite.
Exactly.
Here's a good trick I want to give to people here. Talking about using www.garduel.com/Amazon. One of the things I like to do is I hate going to the mall. I'm like most men. I know most men are like, I want to go to the mall. But no, I don't.
Really?
I'm lying.
I was about to say, I'm a fiction writer.
And I lie. That's right. Yeah. So one of the tricks I do is I love the Amazon Lightning deals because it gives me an opportunity to plan out what I want to get people by looking at what's going to come up that day.
Was it lightning deals?
Lightning deals.
I'm not familiar with this.
And so essentially it's an arrangement they have set up with the vendors. And
so it's a special deal for that day.
And it's like every hour.
Oh, really?
You have to offer a limited supply item, and you're not forced to. You sign up to do this. But it has to be,
you as the vendor, not the customer.
You as the vendor have to offer a limited quantity, and I believe it has to be a limited quantity of items that have to be at least 20% off their average price over the year.
So as the Amazon shopper, I'm getting a deal.
You're getting deals, Amazon shopper. The idea is they're trying to create this sense of, what do they call those? The doorbuster deals on Black Friday every hour.
And also consider this, if you're going to do this, what my notice, if you're not a big Amazon shopper, I use Amazon all the time. I find that 20% tends to be generally about what you're going to pay in shipping. So effectively, it's the same as if you went down to the store, except it's coming right to your house.
Unless you're an Amazon Prime member.
I'm not an Amazon Prime member. I probably should.
You get free 2-day.
I know.
If you spend $100 a year in shipping, it's a no-brainer.
I know.
Plus, you get the streaming service for music and videos.
Yeah. I probably should. I think this coming year, I will probably become an Amazon Prime
Actually, I'm
member.
not positive if the music is part of Prime. That might be a separate service. I'm not sure. I know the
video. Yeah, the video.
The video definitely is, because I use that all the time.
Yeah.
I think the music one might be, but I'm not positive. But the thing is, what I do is you can look ahead to see what are the deals. I think it's for 24 hours out.
They'll post what's coming up.
And then I'll put a reminder on my phone saying, hey,
go
10
buy
o'clock,
this thing. Yeah.
This thing comes up. And since I'm an Amazon Prime member and I don't have to have a certain level of stuff, I can buy just one item. It can be well under the thing, but I'll still get free 2-day shipping. However, here's the nifty thing. Whenever you do an order as an Amazon Prime member, you can opt to downgrade your shipping to normal shipping, just standard shipping, which is 3 to 5 days.
Yeah.
Now, the beautiful thing is, because of this, I'm right after Christmas doing my shopping. I can actually look for things that are meaningful to get for people because they have a huge variety, and you might not even like most of it. But the thing is, you can look ahead to see, oh, this is for Billy, this is for Kristen, this is for Mike, this is for Jeffrey, this is for Jeffrey, this is for Jeffrey.
Michael.
And that's for Mike. And Mikey. Wow.
Listener didn't see my violent threat towards Jeff for calling me Mikey. That doesn't
Which
fly.
is fair. I did kill you off in the last episode.
It's fair. That's more than fair.
But
more than fair that I threaten you with violence. Not more than fair that you call me Mikey after killing me in the last episode. Behind the bar, of which I am a good bartender, I'll have you know.
At least you got your eyes back.
I got my eyes back.
Okay.
So yeah, go to www.garduel.com/Amazon for all of your holiday shopping. Save yourself the trouble of elbowing people at the stores. Save yourself the shipping by becoming a Prime member. It's all good stuff.
The big thing really is, though, when you order the item, if you downgrade your shipping, they will give you $1 off downloadable media. So
for each purchased item?
For each shipped item.
For each
shipment. So especially if you're doing this lightning thing, you're now getting $1 for every present you buy.
Nice.
So let's say you order 10 things, that's $10 in downloadable media. You can buy an extra book for someone. You can buy an extra book for yourself. Whatever you want to do.
Nice.
You can extend your budget another $1 per shipment.
Right.
So,
and if you're because you're a Prime member, you're not going to be concerned about having multiple shipments because you're not paying for shipping.
And because you don't have to go to the store, you're not waiting until Christmas Eve to go in, so you're not worried about that.
Yeah.
Because you have several weeks before Christmas.
And shopping online is so much faster and easier. It's like,
and the thing I like to is because I'm not going to the store, I'm not rushing, I will actually buy better things for people when I buy them stuff because I'm looking for things for that person. I'm not just trying to get out of the mall.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Okay, everyone's getting a gray shirt.
Wait, well, they got a stack of different colors here, but Billy gets blue, Bobby gets red.
No.
Gray.
It's all gray.
It's all gray.
I'll take the first 5.
Yeah, and if it's the wrong size, they'll have to return it.
Would you like these women's blouses wrapped? Yeah, whatever. Wait, you can do that? Yeah, wrap them.
Yeah. Yes, wrap them.
And the other nice thing is, too, I think...
blouse for Uncle John? Yeah, blouse.
With Amazon as well, you can say, this is a gift for, and they actually will wrap and send the gift to an address for you.
Yeah, you could have it sent to the person. So if Nana lives in another state, you can have Nana's gift sent right to Nana.
Sent right to Nana.
Save yourself the trouble of packing it up and going to the post office.
Since I've started doing this, I've had no stress around the Christmas Eve. Well, outside of trying to figure out how do I go to all of the parties
Yeah.
That I want to.
Speaking of which, I hope you're going to make my holiday party. That's what the other thing I was going to say is that like Sarah and Mai's, like you don't want to acknowledge Christmas before Thanksgiving. Sarah and I have to because we have our holiday party in the first week of December. So we have to prep for it ahead of time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But, it's more of a thing where I go to stores. I don't want to see Christmas stuff out.
Yeah. I saw a Christmas tree in Walmart before Halloween. Yeah. I was like, really? Yeah. All right. So why don't we cover the tease and get out of this episode? Because I feel like we've been rambling on forever.
The tease for the next episode is mythology. How to start building your own mythology. And as always, make sure to go to gardul.com. That's GARDUL.com for the show notes. It'll be under podcasting, World Builders Anvil. That's a great place to get all of the information from the episode that you've just listened to and to see all the resources that we've talked about in this episode. Thanks for joining us this episode of the World Builders Anvil. Please be sure to rate and review us in iTunes, and please help get the word out to your friends about our show. And join me, Jeffrey W. Ingram at Gardul.com, to see the progress of my world and learn why I made the choices I did. And please contact me and let me know the topics you would love to hear in the future. Now strike while the myth rolls high.